There are many challenges to living in Dublin. And no, not just being confused by the hot weather when suddenly there is a sunny day like I am today. There are actual challenges that lots of us, I'd say almost every one of us, faces when living in the city. And I know on this channel we try to talk a lot about the stuff with a humorous side, but we do also want to show a realistic picture. So today we want to talk about some of the challenges you experience living in Dublin, and challenges that, to be honest, are also the reason a lot of people end up moving from here.
Of course, we had to start with this one. Everyone knows about the housing crisis here in Ireland. In fact, it is so well known that one of our friends living in Estonia said that they actually played the news report talking about it all the way in Estonia. As we're making this, one of the latest reports from 2023 has said that the rents in Dublin have reached 2,300 euros. That's a lot of money, and it only increases from here on out. It is very competitive in order to find a place to rent here in Dublin. The wine actually alerted me to this article where it was saying that young guards actually cannot afford living in Dublin. They're trying to go through the training, and the amount of money they get for this training is not enough to actually cover the rent. So there have been stories of, these young guards having to drop out of the programs. And you hear this from other professionals that are really needed in the city, but they just can't afford to live there. There are also companies like Ryanair, who earlier this year were actually buying entire estates of properties so that their workers could have a place to live. Right now, it is really crazy, and even if you're moving to Ireland, especially Dublin, or if in Dublin itself, some of our friends themselves, they take weeks and weeks to actually find a place to rent that is within their price range.
An obvious challenge of living in Ireland is the weather. Often days it's just like today, rather grey, everything looks a bit more dull. That is a legit comment we've gotten on videos before. And it can affect your mood a little bit as well, especially in winters when it gets dark very early. You might have noticed that it affects your mood. And yes, we've all heard the joke that Ireland does get a summer, about 1 week of it. But you also still have to deal with the weather for the rest of the year. And where you feel it actually the most is not outside, because you can buy clothes to help you deal with the weather there. It's on the inside. A lot of the housing stock isn't exactly set up to deal with the cold weather. Now, you'd think that newer builds are set up better for the heating. Well, if you live in a house that's built to rent, like we are, it turns out that the landlords decided to install just whatever heating is the cheapest, in this case electric heaters, and a storage heater that makes absolutely no sense. Even the way the heaters are placed in the house don't make sense. Don't place the heater by the exit of the door where the rest of the room can't access the heat, and the heat goes all the way out and through the door. It's expensive for us to try and heat, and it doesn't even actually heat the house. We've had to use extra storage heaters to properly heat up the house to keep us from being cold. It's always hard to make friends in a new place. We've even heard from Irish people outside of Dublin that they feel Dublin can be very cliquey and it can be very hard to make new friends. In our experience, a lot of the locals do end up spending much of their time with their families, and that leaves rather less time to spend that with friends, let alone new friends. The hardest part perhaps is maintaining friendships, even once you've met friends. So for a lot of people, friendships start out at work as work colleagues, and then you try and stay in touch after one of you leaves the job, which is often where those friendships end. Another reason it can be hard to keep up friendships is because of, the housing crisis. Oftentimes, a lot of areas are very transient, so people move around a lot. Like in our example, we have friends who've ended up moving to Navan, to Wicklow, to County Louth. Like not even just to different parts of the city, but the wider, greater, if it's even a stretch to call it greater Dublin area, basically the neighbouring counties. Or they've packed up and moved back to their home county altogether, like moving to Cork. Or they've even left the country to move on to other countries in the EU or the rest of the world.
And one of the reasons you may not actually be able to reach your friends is because of the transport system. Now, I think I mentioned it before, but it's kind of like a hub and spoke model with the bus system. Everything goes to and from Dublin, kind of north to south. If you want to go east and west, the options are very limited. Sure, there's a Lewis, but that's kind of small, it's kind of slow as well. But that's more in the city centre. For example, where we live, there are different amenities and stuff that we would really like to access. But to do that, we need to go down into town and then back up. Everywhere isn't this, but as you get higher and north of Dublin, it's more suburbs. And then you stop being able to, quickly access some of the stuff. I think that some people, if they don't have a car, do get tired of that setup. Of course, if you watch the channel, you know that I've been trying to live here in Dublin, kind of without a car. But the further out you go, the more you realize, I need a car. It is, especially the suburbs, a bit more car dependent. Pretty much, if you're going to get a car, there are, different fees, and especially if you're non-EU, you have to do the license over, or even if you're EU, get your own license transferred. And this extra cost and time may deter people from, wanting to live somewhere where you're not really using the car that much. A lot of people in our area using the car basically for groceries on weekends or going out sometimes. It's not really worth the cost, but the inconvenience of not having one would put a strain on your pocket.
Another challenge of living in Dublin is how work-centric life here is. Of course, a lot of people, whether they're Irish or from other countries, move to Dublin for work, and in fairness, same here. And that sets you up for your social life to be centered around work. Even the company culture of many companies here are set up to make your social life more dependent on work. So for example, oftentimes there'll be things like Friday night or Thursday night at the pub, so you're expected kind of to go out with your co-workers for a pint after work. Or there's a lot of work events for any kind of seasonal thing going on at the office, or even just a happy hour. There's also clubs or the gym. So the companies try to provide you with your social life. But also the other challenges that we mentioned in this video make the culture here more work-centric. For example, with how high the living costs are, or just housing in itself, how difficult it can be. People are a lot more mindful of they need to keep a job, and when there's lots of rounds of redundancies, as I've experienced, I think, in every job I've had so far in Ireland, there were some sort of redundancies. You're also always mindful of your career and what's the next job you might want to take or need to take. It's a well-known fact that Dublin is the headquarter for a lot of American multinational companies. And as such, some of that business culture also transfers into the work culture of the place in general. And for some people that you meet sometimes, you also feel like it transfers into their personal lives. Certain buzzwords that they love to use, certain ways to talk, simple things of how they try to organize just a meetup or how they interact with people.
Associated with all of this, of course, is the cost of living. Dublin, like many other cities, it's expensive to live, but also inflation. Inflation in cities has generally risen more than it has in other places, and Dublin is no exception. In Dublin, it seems like your job is very, very important, because how else are you going to pay for these higher prices and inflation? It definitely feels like if wants to live in Dublin, you're in a constant battle against inflation and trying to get better and better pay. Of course, people would say that, hey, you're in tech finance, there's nothing to worry about. Lately, there have been the tech layoffs, and definitely less tech jobs to go around. Even if you're not, salaries are stagnating as well. Come together to make Dublin a very difficult place to live.
If you enjoyed this video and want to follow us on our journey, make sure to subscribe. And if you yourself are living in Dublin or somewhere similar with these challenges, make sure to check out our book. The link is in the description, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!